Good afternoon. Today I'm going to play a little game with VCV Rack that I made up called the Random Module Game. And there are 3 rules. Your patch must contain only 3 modules, 2 of which are randomly selected, and the third one is chosen by you. And you have to randomize the settings on one of them as a starting point. And the only goals of this exercise is to make a sound. It's probably not going to sound good, but to just make something that you can hear, an audible frequency, and to understand what each module is doing in this setup. There are over 1,800 free VCV Rack modules, and it's not immediately clear what all of them do just by looking at them or reading their name. So hopefully with this game, we can uncover some hidden gems and just make some weird stuff you wouldn't normally think of. I made this handy link, which if you click on it will give you 2 random modules from the VCV Rack library. Let's click on it and let's get our first 2 random modules. All right, these are 2 I've never heard of or used before. We have Modular's MaugSquare and Submarine FF212. Okay, so we have our 2 randomly selected modules here, and I forgot to mention that the output module does not count towards our 3. So these are our 2 to start with. If we input a square into this from this square oscillator, you can see if we switch to LFO mode, it becomes a trigger for this. And then if we output it here, you might be able to hear a little click. And it happens every other time that is triggered. And that goes down this whole thing. So every other time this one rises, this one will go high and low. It'll flip-flop alternating like that. And if I bring this into the audio domain, you can hear that translates into octaves because half of the frequency gives you an octave. So I think a much more interesting use for a flip-flop logic gate, instead of using it to create audio, I think you can create some really interesting triggers because this becomes a binary counter, which can have some really interesting rhythmic patterns built into it. So to pick the third one, I just wanted to look for something that had a lot of trigger inputs because this can only output squares or flip-flopping gates. So it wasn't really an interesting thing to use to modulate stuff, but to trigger things. So I think what I'm going to pick is the synths SStudio, which is a sampler that takes one audio file and can give it a bunch of playheads, and you can change the way it plays, and it's a really cool device. But my thought is I'm going to load a sample into here and then change this to gated mode, and I'm going to use this cascading flip-flop chain as a way to trigger different playheads. So I actually have this folder of old piano samples played by Errol Gardner, which I did like 4 years ago for a project. And as you can see, there's all these different lanes, and we're going to have this in LFO mode and begin to trigger. So, oh, I forgot to connect the output. That's important. So we have this piano sample. Then if I connect a second playhead, I'm going to go to a different one. So very these are moments of, let's try to find one that's a bit more, there we go. Let's see what else we have. Let's mess with the octaves. Uncheck cycled. sampler also lets us reverse. But I think for the purpose of this game, this is probably the patch I would choose as like the final version and the one that worked the best to demonstrate that you can use flip-flopping logic gates to make some interesting polyrhythms, and it works really well for a device that needs a lot of triggers, like this multi-sampler from NSynthy. Oh wait, that's not even what that... It's Nisthi? I've been reading that wrong the whole time, but yeah. I think I'm gonna end the first episode here, so thanks for watching.